What's next for Khamzat Chimaev after UFC 319 win? What's up everyone, and welcome back to MMA Buzz Official. Today, let's dive into what's next for Khamzat Chimaev after his huge UFC 319 victory. Chimaev wasn't able to put Dricus Du Plessis away quickly like he has with so many opponents before, but he dominated nearly all 25 minutes of the UFC 319 main event, capturing the UFC middleweight crown. Chimaev took Du Plessis down almost at will throughout the fight, and the former champion had no answers for the relentless wrestling. Time and again, Chimaev locked DDP in a crucifix position. While he wasn't able to deal massive damage from there, the control alone showed just how superior his grappling was. Du Plessis did have a few moments late in the fight, but after 5 rounds there was no doubt that Borz would leave with the belt, and he did. Even Dana White admitted that Chimaev dominated the fight from start to finish. So, the big question is, who could Chimaev face in his first title defense? Renato de Ritter was in attendance, and given his elite grappling, that matchup could be very interesting. Another option is the winner of the upcoming fight between Nassourdine Imavov and Keo Borralho on September 6th. Anthony Hernandez is also in the mix, riding an 8-fight win streak, but since he's ranked number 7, he may need another big win before getting his shot. As for Chimaev, he's eager to make a quick turnaround and fight again at UFC 320 in Abu Dhabi, on a card headlined by Alex Pereira vs Magomed Ankalaev, with Merab Dvalishvili vs Corey Sandhagen in the co-main event. When asked about it, Chimaev made it clear, he's healthy, he's ready, and he wants to fight again as soon as possible. Dana White even hinted that the UFC might consider it. So, who do you think Chimaev should fight next? And do you believe any of these contenders have what it takes to hand Borz his first defeat? What's next for Aaron Pico? Following UFC 319, Aaron Pico entered UFC 319 with a ton of hype surrounding his debut. Many believed his combination of elite wrestling and explosive striking could quickly make him a contender in the featherweight division. Early on, Pico came out aggressively, mixing in his wrestling and putting Lone Murphy under pressure. For a moment, it looked like Pico was on track to hand Murphy the first loss of his career. But everything changed in an instant. Before the first round ended, Murphy landed a devastating spinning elbow that knocked Pico out cold, an early candidate for knockout of the year. The finish sent shockwaves through the MMA world, immediately elevating Murphy's stock while derailing Pico's long-anticipated debut. So, where does Pico go from here? At just 28 years old, it's far too soon to write him off as a future contender. Despite setbacks earlier in his career, Pico had been making waves in Bellator before this transition to the UFC, with his only loss since 2022 coming due to injury. The UFC is unlikely to give up on a fighter with his talent and upside. A matchup against another top 15 featherweight, likely outside the top 10, seems the most logical next step as he looks to rebuild momentum. As for Lone Murphy, this victory marks the biggest moment of his career so far. With a highlight reel knockout over a highly touted prospect, Murphy is already calling for a shot at featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski. And while that may seem ambitious, it's hard to deny that a performance like this puts him on the fast track to contention. Alexander Volkanovski has once again called out Lerone Murphy, following Murphy's stunning victory. After the fight, Volkanovski congratulated Murphy on the win and publicly challenged him to a matchup in December. Shortly afterward, he even doubled down with a follow-up video, making it clear he wants to fight. Volkanovski acknowledged that some fans might argue Movsar Evloev deserves the opportunity instead. He explained that he had pushed for that matchup, believing Evloev had earned it, but circumstances prevented the fight from materializing. According to Volkanovski, Evloev pulled out despite the UFC adjusting dates to make it possible, likely due to a serious injury. With Evloev sidelined, Volkanovski believes Lerone Murphy is the most logical opponent. He stated, "It makes a lot of sense right now. Let's do Lerone Murphy in December." Sounds great. This potential matchup could create a massive shakeup in the featherweight division, and fans are already buzzing about the possibility of Volkanovski versus Murphy by year's end. The MMA community erupted in outrage after UFC 319, accusing referee Marc Goddard of cheating during the highly anticipated bout between Khamzat Chimaev and Dricus Du Plessis DDP. Chimaev was dominating the fight, advancing position and landing heavy strikes while grappling with Du Plessis. However, in a shocking moment, Goddard stood them up in the middle of the action, effectively giving DDP another chance to get back into the fight. Many fans and fighters believe this decision was an intentional move to help Du Plessis survive. Commentators and fans were quick to react. Joe Rogan, who has criticized similar referee decisions in the past, immediately called it out, live during the broadcast. Online, the MMA community exploded, labeling Goddard's actions as blatant cheating. One fan wrote, "We need Marc Goddard out as a UFC ref. He blatantly attempted to cheat for DDP, standing them up while Chimaev was mauling him. It's DDP's job to get up, not Goddard's. Even fighters weighed in. Morab Davalishvili commented, "I'm only scared of God and Mark Goddard." That was blatant cheating. Chimaev wasn't stalling, he was dominating. Others demanded an immediate investigation, saying the referee allowed the crowd to influence his decision and gave Du Plessis a lifeline he didn't earn. The backlash grew stronger. As more voices joined in, many called Goddard's performance absolute garbage and the worst refereeing they had ever seen. Critics argued that his repeated stand-ups robbed Chimaev of finishing opportunities and unfairly favored Du Plessis. Some even went as far as calling for Goddard to be fired and permanently banned from officiating UFC events. The fight ultimately ended with Chimaev securing a dominant victory and the title, but controversy overshadowed the result. Fans argued that Du Plessis' only meaningful moment in the fight came because of Goddard's intervention. As one viewer bluntly put it, "By the way, fire Goddard. He is a trash referee. Constantly standing up a dominant wrestler could have cost Chimaev the whole fight." This controversy raises a critical question about UFC officiating. Should referees be allowed to intervene so aggressively in moments where a fighter is clearly advancing? Wrestling and grappling are fundamental parts of MMA, and many argue that standing fighters up during active ground control undermines the integrity of the sport. The debate continues across social media and MMA circles, with fans demanding consistency and fairness in officiating. For many, Mark Goddard's decisions at UFC 319 represent not just bad judgment, but possible corruption. Do you think Mark Goddard intentionally cheated to make the fight more interesting? Share your thoughts in the comments. Dana White suspends UFC fighter for using PEDs. What's up, everyone, and welcome back to MMA Buzz Official. Alvin Hines won't be returning to the octagon for his second UFC bout anytime soon, as the heavyweight has been suspended for testing positive for PEDs. Hines is coming off a unanimous decision loss to Janata Denise at UFC 317 in June, which was the American's first professional loss. Recently, the UFC announced that Hines has been hit with a one-year suspension. The official statement revealed that Hines tested positive for the anabolic steroid drostanolone. It's metabolite 3-ahydroxy2, amethyl-5-androsten 171, testosterone metabolites, as well as a metabolite of tamoxifen, a hormone and metabolic modulator. All of these substances are prohibited. The statement also provided context for the decision, explaining that despite the positive tests, Hines fully cooperated with the CSA investigation. He submitted to a detailed interview and even gave explicit details about his use of these substances prior to joining the UFC. He also claimed he believed they would no longer be present in his system once he signed and was tested. As always, when a fighter gets caught for PEDs, reactions online were quick to pour in. One comment read, "This guy, just look at him. There's no way he wasn't on something." Another said, "It's always these lower-level guys with zero value to the UFC that get caught. When was the last time a top-level fighter popped for steroids? What a coincidence." And one fan wrote, "I thought he was just a simple man who got his shot, but nah, he cheated." So, what do you think? Do you agree that Hines should only be suspended for a year? And how do you see this impacting his UFC career moving forward? What's next for Aaron Pico? Following UFC 319, Aaron Pico entered UFC 319 with a ton of hype surrounding his debut. Many believed his combination of elite wrestling and explosive striking could quickly make him a contender in the featherweight division. Early on, Pico came out aggressively, mixing in his wrestling and putting Lone Murphy under pressure. For a moment, it looked like Pico was on track to hand Murphy the first loss of his career, but everything changed in an instant. Before the first round ended, Murphy landed a devastating spinning elbow that knocked Pico out cold, an early candidate for Knockout of the Year. The finish sent shockwaves through the MMA world, immediately elevating Murphy's stock while derailing Pico's long-anticipated debut. So, where does Pico go from here? At just 28 years old, it's far too soon to write him off as a future contender. Despite setbacks earlier in his career, Pico had been making waves in Bellator before this transition to the UFC, with his only loss since 2022 coming due to injury. The UFC is unlikely to give up on a fighter with his talent and upside. A matchup against another top 15 featherweight, likely outside the top 10, seems the most logical next step as he looks to rebuild momentum. As for Lone Murphy, this victory marks the biggest moment of his career so far. With a highlight reel knockout over a highly touted prospect, Murphy is already calling for a shot at featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski. And while that may seem ambitious, it's hard to deny that a performance like this puts him on the fast track to contention. After the fight, reactions from the MMA world came in swiftly and with plenty of variety. One fighter admitted bluntly, "I hate to say it," adding to shrug emojis to show his reluctance in admitting how one-sided the contest had been. It was clear he didn't want to acknowledge just how dominant the performance was, but he had no choice. Chimaev Baheo added a touch of mystery with a cryptic post. "I have the answer." He didn't elaborate, leaving fans to speculate if he was hinting at being the one to stop Chimaev in the future. Bilal Muhammad, however, took a far more humorous route. He wrote, "Shout out to Dricus. You showed a lot of heart and you never gave up. Just kidding, you sucked. That was 5-108. He followed it up with another jab, saying, "Told you it would be easy." Bilal has never been one to hold back, and this was another example of his sharp-tongued style. Then came Conor McGregor's reaction, which caught many off guard. He congratulated Chimaev with the message, "China's first UFC champion. Congrats." Whether it was a slip, sarcasm, or just classic McGregor mischief, the post sparked plenty of debate online. Rising contender Bo Nickel admitted that watching the performance lit a fire under him, stating, "I really got to lock in." As a dominant wrestler himself, his comment showed how seriously Chimaev's display was being taken by other elite grapplers. Michael Bisping kept it simple. "Wow, total domination." Meanwhile, Jack Hermanson offered a more analytical breakdown, suggesting that Reinier de Ridder might actually be Chimaev's toughest stylistic matchup. "You need jiu-jitsu if you want any chance." His take reflected a growing consensus that wrestling alone may not be enough to solve Chimaev's relentless pressure. MMA journalist Ariel Helwani summed it up in polished fashion. Fight concludes, Chimaev, 5-0. Total dominance. But credit to Dricus, who never quit and had some hope in the fifth. The Chimaev era has officially begun. His words captured both the respect for Dricus' toughness and the recognition of Chimaev's historic breakthrough. Dominic Cruz added his perspective, noting, "Same pace, same pressure, same style, completely effective." Renowned coach Firas Zahabi went even further, calling it incredible and predicting Chimaev will be one of the most dominant champions ever. Not everyone was impressed, though. Paulo Costa dismissed the fight, posting, "No one wants to watch this," people booing in the arena and at the bar. Derek Brunson chimed in with humor, joking that former UFC matchmaker Joe Silva would have cut Chimaev simply for being a wrestler. Henry Cejudo struck a more balanced tone, praising Dricus' toughness but concluding Chimaev is on another level right now. He may be champion for years to come. Finally, the man of the moment spoke for himself. In his trademark mix of broken English and raw honesty, Chimaev said, "That guy's strong. That boy, sorry boys, happy always. Get my money, then, send my money, brother. I'm waiting for that more, and that belt is important for my country." His words reflected gratitude, determination, and national pride. From the flood of reactions, one thing became clear. The MMA community recognizes that a new era may have just begun. Later in the show, Johnny X stirred the pot by suggesting that Ilia Topuria could eventually face Islam Makhachev. He went even further, saying he actually favors Islam to beat Ilia not only at lightweight but even at welterweight. However, he emphasized that first things first, Islam has to take care of business against Jack Della Maddalena at Madison Square Garden. Regardless of that outcome, the possibility of Islam versus Ilia remains very real. If Islam loses, a drop back down in weight could set up the fight. If he wins, chasing a legacy matchup with Ilia still makes perfect sense. But here's where things get even more interesting. Ilia's former training partner, Khamzat Chimaev, has a very different perspective. He believes Ilia should fight Arman Tsarukyan instead, calling them the two best lightweights who need to settle it inside the cage. Arman isn't holding back either. He insists he's the more complete fighter, dismissing Ilia's wrestling entirely and claiming Ilia only relies on boxing, while he brings a full arsenal: kicks, knees, elbows, wrestling, and grappling. Arman even went as far as to say he's the better striker overall and can beat Ilia no matter where the fight goes. So now, with analysts planting seeds for Ilia versus Islam, Khamzat pushing for Ilia versus Arman, and both fighters exchanging words, the lightweight division feels ready to explode, regardless of which path the UFC chooses. Johnny X closed his thoughts by saying, "I do think you'll see Islam back at 155. That's the fight, the dream matchup. If I had to send anybody in there, maybe even across two divisions, to beat Ilia right now, it would be Islam."